Pick me up, love. Pick me up, love. Come on, let me tell you.
Hello, everyone. We are live.
Hey, Deacon Adam.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Stop
How are you? You're much bigger than I am. Oh, there we go.
It's because I'm.
What are you doing up there?
That's because I'm a calzone. And you're a panini. I'm gonna say it first. We should open with the prayer.
Wait! I have an idea.
What?
We should have our guest say the prayer today.
Do you want to bring him on now, and then he can listen to our updates?
Yeah,
okay.
We're gonna spring this on him.
Okay, let's surprise him. Okay, Father John Fenton.
Thank you. How are you? Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed, as they say at Oxford.
And as they say in the Western Rite, he is risen indeed. Alleluia.
Alleluia. That's right.
Alleluia.
We add the Alleluia.
So, Father John, will you lead us in a prayer?
Yes, I will. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O God, who by the resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ, didst vouchsafe to give gladness unto the world, grant that by the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we may attain to the joys of everlasting life, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
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 I'm going to double check that we're live. I've had a couple. You remember my first episode, I went live on my personal profile instead of the Facebook page. So, yeah, when we were finished, they were like, where were you? Like, I don't know. We were there. Where were you? So, yeah, everything looks good. Okay, so we're live.
Okay.
So I'm going to do an update. I sent an email out yesterday I didn't send it. Father John, I wrote it, and then Father John Finley sent out an update for St. Athanasius Academy. A couple of things. We have so many classes available for middle school and high school in the fall. If you're interested in any of that, go check out that. There's so many subjects, and we're growing. We sent an email saying if you have ideas or requests for subjects, let us know. We got back like 15 requests. Some of those requests were people volunteering to be faculty saying, I think I'm qualified to teach civics, for example, we're working on algebra right now. We're working on a logic class. So many exciting things happening. I think we're also working on a church history class. And it's not like it's a history class that looks at what's happening in the world and looks at Orthodox church history at the same time. Quite fascinating. So we have all sorts of things we're working on for the fall. Even though we've already opened registration, I feel like it's not too late to keep adding classes for the fall. So I'm pretty excited about that. And that's all available at saaot.edu. I'm going to put that down here in the comment section. That's my main update.
Well, my update will piggyback on that. After our show with Lindsay last week, talking about the homeschool tutorial in English, I signed up my son because after she convinced me by saying that if you were a character from literature, you would be Donkey from Shrek. Once she said that, she had me.
You're sold.
So I was sold. So I signed up my son for the fall semester for her English class.
That's
I'm looking
awesome.
forward to him taking that.
He'll be in there with Audrey, my daughter.
Awesome.
And then my two older ones are in her high school class.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot going on there. It's I'm so excited. I can't believe how much it's grown after just launching July of last year.
It's great. Thank God.
Okay. So
you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, Father John Fenton. You've got several titles. I know you're a Monsignor. Is that correct?
That is the Western Rite equivalent of Archpriest.
Archpriest. And then you are the assistant to the Vicar General of the
Yes.
Western Rite Vicariate in the Antiochian Archdiocese. And then you are the pastor of St. Michael Orthodox Church in Whittier, California.
That's correct.
Which is about, 30 minutes, no traffic to LA.
Right now, yes.
Right now. And we're having you on. And so anything else that we should know about you before we get into today's topic? You got a lot of kids.
I do have a lot of kids. I have 7 children, 11 grandchildren. They're all graduated from college except the youngest one who's going to graduate from 8th grade somehow. in the next few weeks.
Somehow. So, and how long have you been in California now? It's what, 7 years?
It's been 5 years, coming up
5
on
years.
the end of 5 years. And before that, I was in Michigan for 9 years. 9 years
Okay.
at a little mission in Michigan.
Okay.
And
so
before that, a Lutheran pastor for 16 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So today's topic, I'm quite interested because we have a number of people around North America trying to figure out how to do more in men's ministry. And I've even met a lot of people who are convinced that's kind of like a linchpin. Like when you get the dad or the father involved, something shifts with the family. And that's not specifically what we're talking about today, but I do know there is a heightened interest in men's ministry because of that, wondering, we've seen the studies about when the dad's involved, how things shift with the family. And I don't think you're not doing just dads, but that those studies have made people more interested in men's ministry and what you've been offering. And from our conversations earlier, I felt like you had something to share that was working out rather well. So I don't know really how to get started on this.
Well, let me tell you what was in place when I got here.
Okay.
When I got here, there was a very active women's group, the Antiochian Women's Group, and there was a Sunday school that was kind of limping along, and that was it. I tried in many various ways to start a men's group. I tried to have an actual, here's the time, here's the book, here's the place kind of men's group. And they met for the first couple of weeks, and then that was it. I tried what I called courtyard conversations, where just ad hoc, I'd send out an email, say, hey, I'm in the courtyard, bring something to eat, something to drink, and we'll just chat. And that worked out kind of, but it was very loose. And you never knew who was going to show up, and sometimes it was me and one other guy, and sometimes it was me and 15 guys, and sometimes it was me and 4 women and 3 guys. You just never knew. And the conversations ranged all over the place. Sometimes it was just crabbing about stuff going on, and sometimes it was actually good theological in-depth conversations. I have a parishioner who has his master's degree in counseling, and there's a parishioner from another Orthodox church nearby who does life coaching. And they approached me with this idea of having some sort of workshop for men that was an extension from what we had done, just a one-off, about a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago, we put together, Deacon Nicholas Mamie and I, put together this one-day retreat for men struggling with issues revolving around the sin of lust. And we made it very clear this was for men. We made it very clear that if women showed up, they were welcome, but they would shut down the conversation and no one would talk. And we had about a dozen or so folks from different parishes, because we advertised it around the deanery. Different parishes showed up and had a great one-day conversation about these issues. Part of what came from that is an article in Word magazine that I wrote for that conference called St. Joseph, the Patron Saint of Chastity. It was published maybe 6 months ago or so in Word magazine. And we said, hey, we should do this again sometime, and then the momentum just kind of died. That's when I was approached by this parishioner who said, well, let's try this. Let's try a 10-week workshop. Let's try and do something that is not just focused on one particular passion, but just generally on the different things that men struggle with. So with his counseling degree and with the help of the life coach, we started this, and it was called a men's workshop, self-examination. And it was done purposely during Lent as a way of encouraging us to examine ourselves a little more deeply toward private confession. So we started that a few weeks before Lent began, because it was 10 weeks. We met with good success. Again, people from not just our parish, but from other parishes came, those who are interested. And we met on a Thursday night. We had a very clear time limit, 90 minutes, that was it. We gathered a half hour earlier for those who came from work that wanted to have something to eat. Somebody always provided some sort of meal. I made my chicken cacciatore the first night because we were not in Lent yet, so we could have that. Others made different things. We had squid one night. That was fun. That was when we were in Lent. And we met. And of course, the pandemic hit and all of that. And so that shifted us. And I thought, well, that's the end of this. But those two men, Willie and Walter, the two that had helped coordinate this, said, no, let's push this forward. This is doing good work. So we started meeting by Zoom. And some of the attendance dropped off, but for the most part, the same guys that were there at the meetings in person were there by Zoom. The largest number we had for one meeting was about a dozen one night. And usually for the Zoom meetings, we had 7, 8, 9 people. Okay? We got to the end of that. We all knew it was as soon as we got to Holy Week, it was over. And so we had our last session and said, okay, what do we do next? And everyone agreed, keep going. So after Holy Week, after Easter week, because I said I needed a break, then we resumed with our Zoom meetings, but we structured it differently. And I encouraged Walter and Willie, and the three of us kind of worked together in presenting the material and all of that. I said, let's have a social night and let's have a structured night. So the social night is we just get together, we talk about stuff. Sometimes we begin by telling jokes because that kind of breaks the ice and gets things going. And all the jokes are about priests.
We already knew that.
Yeah. And then the structured night is we're going to work through the book. Now the title doesn't come to me. Bread, Wine, Water, Oil, or something like that by
Father Melitios Weber.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we had suggested that at the beginning of our 10-week sessions, but they ended up being partly group sharing, something along the lines of a AA program, but not exactly that at all. But we had kind of that structure where we'd introduce ourselves, we'd go through and say how you're feeling and what's on your mind and what have you been struggling with. And then we go into some sort of lesson. We never really got to the book. And so now we're going to get to the book more clearly. So we've structured that someone is going to lead a chapter, summarize it, bring up questions, we'll discuss it, we'll move on. That's the structured night. That's every other Thursday. The social night is where we just sit around and talk. Part of what pushed this forward for me was that I went to a Jordan Peterson meetup group because the Reformed pastor of the group said, I need an Orthodox priest here. I said, okay, I'm an Orthodox priest. I can show up. You're not that far away. I went with one of my parishioners and I learned something very significant there. Had nothing to do with Jordan Peterson, but I was interested in the phenomenon of why these meetup groups were happening. And the thing I learned is men need to talk to men. So that was part of the impetus of let's just try something and have a conversation. The social night then is men talking to men about whatever. As I've told my parishioners, women naturally have a way of talking to each other. Men need a little more push to do that. So that's what we're doing.
I'm curious, can you share a little bit about the demographic? You started with the workshop, the all-day workshop. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the demographics on that versus the weekly series in terms of age range, married, single, dad, that kind of stuff. I'm just kind of sure who's been showing up at the different.
The all-day workshop was primarily single men, younger adults. We kind of targeted it that direction, but the topic and everything lent itself to that. And frankly, young adults, single men are a little more interested and open to speak about these issues than people of my generation, let's say. Okay? When we shifted to the 10-week self-examination, now we got married and single, older and younger, a very nice mix of folks. folks that were from the parish, folks that were not. Some folks that were not even Orthodox showed up. Some that were at very different stages of their life, and it was very good that way.
What do you see moving forward? Do you think this will continue through the summer? Like, I think it's always good to like have periods of rest, like you took off after Holy Week, and things can somehow that feel really pertinent now eventually kind of tire us. So what do you foresee for the future?
I have tried to implement here, and it's met with some success, that July is shutdown month. So during July, we don't have our studies, our Bible studies. We don't have our meetings. It's just shutdown month. Everybody takes a rest. Of course, we still have liturgical services and everything, but that's what I've tried to implement. And for the most part, as I said, I've met with some success. So I'm guessing that would be the case. However, at this time with coronavirus, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. If we're back to some semblance of normal, then probably it will happen. If we're not, then we might just continue meeting. I could see where there could be some Thursdays we just say we need a break. So let's go every other Thursday for a while and then come back to the full every Thursday.
Father Matthew, do you have any?
Why did you choose Thursday?
It's the night that worked well for our parish calendar. Wednesdays, we usually have a Bible study in the evening. So Thursday worked out well. I had tried Fridays for the courtyard conversations, and the feedback I got from the guys that came occasionally was, usually on Fridays I'm done with my work week. I just want to sit home and relax or be done. So Thursdays worked a little better that way too. And we're a little freer on what we can eat.
That's right.
Just a little bit.
I think it's a good choice.
So you're not doing weekly squid?
No, not anymore.
Okay.
Did you have any pushback from gentlemen either in the group or people who have stayed away from this in terms of saying like, I don't want to share my feelings, or I don't have problems that I need to address, or whatever those maybe stereotypical macho reactions might be? Did you get some of that pushback? And if so, how did you handle it?
The invitation was always an open invitation. Everybody was free to come and go as they wished. So we had a little pushback, like you mentioned, and so those folks did show up. But that's because of that. That's part of the reason why I suggested we have a social night, so that anyone can jump in. We don't have to talk about feelings. We don't have to talk about, things. We just chat about whatever. On the structured night, we try and go a little more deeply into it. There are times when, even personally myself, I would come home, my wife would say, "You really like doing this?" And I said, "Yes, but it got a little close to the bone today." And we just have to learn to deal with that. But if the point is self-examination, if the point is trying to find out who I am so that I can better work on myself, we're going to cut close to the bone, and that's okay.
So I have a question from Harry that's actually a technical question. Harry's asking about moving the captions for Father John's video. And that's a Facebook thing that I can't adjust. You can turn off your captions. I know exactly what you're talking about. If you go to settings, and there's captions that are auto. It's not you.
The closed captioning.
It's a closed captioning thing, and they're pretty much auto-generated. So if you go to the little gear or the settings thing in your Facebook feed, you can turn that off. And I've noticed auto closed captioning for Orthodox conversations get really bizarre, because they don't know what the things they came up with sometimes for our words. It could actually make it very confusing if you're trying to read the captions. I don't recommend it for what we're doing. But I understand what you're saying, and that is something the nature that got it. Thanks. Okay, good. Harry's got that. So
when we
pointed that out.
When we did our litany and our prayers for pestilence on Fridays, which is the Western Rite version of the Akathist, my wife said the first night, she said, "You guys got to turn off the captions. This is just weird stuff." Because it didn't match at all.
Yeah. 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 So that's how you do it. There's so much Facebook stuff that we deal with that's not us, and so I do my best to help people. So, Father Matthew, you have something?
I always thought it would be fun to be a closed caption like typist or something and put in the wrong words, like instead of begging for mercy, like begging for bird seed, things like that. I always thought it would be really fun to do that. But go ahead.
No, it's funny that I would do something completely different. I would end every other sentence with pizza. Just throw that in there. I think people would ignore it, Yeah. Or they'd get really hungry.
Except during Lent. During Lent, it would have to be squid.
Yeah, it's squid.
So maybe we could get back on track a little bit. Father John, your comment about some topics cutting close to the bone reminded me of a quote that I saw from Elder Emilianos, who died recently. He was the abbot of Simeno Petra Monastery on Mount Athos. And this is from his book, The Mystical Marriage. Okay. He says, the problem is not that it is difficult to find the passions that are in us, but that we don't want to find them. We don't want to know they are there. And when you hold on to it like that, there's no room left inside of you for anything else. And I'm telling you, that one cut straight all the way through my bones. Not close, it cut through the bones.
I have, I'm not familiar with that quote. Thank you for that. Maybe you could post that so that others have access to it.
I think that'd be good.
I've said something along the same lines in a practical vein during these men's workshops. I've said a couple of times, it's not the sin that you forget to confess that condemns you. It's the sin you refuse to give up. The one you keep going back to, not because you're weak, but because you just love it and hang on to it. That's the one that gets you.
That makes sense.
Have you had any of the men in your group come, since the coronavirus, obviously they aren't coming to do confession, but has anybody talked to you personally, pastorally, and expressed that this group has been helpful in helping them weed out some of those passions?
Those conversations are difficult now. Sure. I think that was coming. And I've had one man in particular who has brought up some of the issues that we've talked about. But we're not just trying to examine things like that. We're also dealing with very basic psychology issues like active listening. Like, how do I work with a difficult boss or in a difficult work situation? So it's not simply all about examining myself. What we did have is one man who came out of curiosity and was an inquirer. As a result of our meetings together, said, okay, I'm in. I need to be Orthodox.
Wow.
That's not why we started. I don't see this as a mission effort necessarily, but it's surprising what happens when you just sit down and have these kind of conversations with people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that, so for those who came on later, you talked about the workshop, the one-day workshop you did in the beginning was about lust, and then the multi-week series went into, all the passions. But lust has been an unmet ministry, I think, for a lot of our men, because the world was kind of caught off guard with digital pornography. And it's in your face before you even realize it. And it's one click away for most of the world. And so I think that's a very pertinent issue. And I think it's interesting you've got the younger men who are ready to talk about it and like offload it and deal with it. And then you've got the older generations that, because of their background, pornography was a secret, stays a secret. We don't talk about it. It was always dealt with secretly. Even watching it was risky. Now it's not a risk even, which may scary. So I was just going to share one of the things I signed up for. I volunteered to sign up for it, and I advocate it as a leader, as a deacon, but as clergy, as I signed up for Covenant Eyes, not because it fixes you if this is a problem, but if you want accountability, if you want online accountability, and you want someone to help you with that, Covenant Eyes does a great job. And so I've led the way in saying I'm thankful that I signed up for it. And I tell everybody I'm not ashamed that I signed up for it. I signed up for it to avoid temptation. That's why we sign up for it. We're trying to avoid temptation. And the internet brings us lots of temptation. It brings the temptation of arguing and thinking I'm going to win this argument in this Facebook feed. Like, that's not going to happen, right? And so we have all these temptations. And anytime we can add something, a filter, a tool that helps us fight off these temptations, great. And so there's no shame in using a tool like Covenant Eyes. It's a beautiful thing if you've done that for your family like I have. There's other tools, I think, out there. And like I've shared it in our clergy groups before. Let's lead the way in fighting off temptation and realize that the digital world has brought a whole new perspective of temptation that the Orthodox Church needs to realize is there. And I think our clergy hear this in confession, but kind of caught the world off guard the way digital passions have arisen. Well, and as is pointed out in many spiritual books, and I'm thinking specifically here of Unseen Warfare, the passion of lust is a harder one to overcome than the other passions. In Unseen Warfare, as you work your way through that book, which is another book I'd like to take men through. I tried that at one point and it just didn't last. As you work your way through that book, it says to test how you're doing with these passions, go back into the situation that makes those passions arise, whether it's anger or greed or whatever, but don't do that with lust, because that's a different beast. Right. That makes sense. And I think there are theological reasons going all the way back to the Garden of Eden that explain why that is the case. Absolutely. And I could see where it would make sense, understanding group dynamics, where some of the harder issues you might slide into a multi-week series later on. Because the ones that are a little harder to talk about man to man, or that we feel like a little bit more shame about, and so letting a group get to know each other over several weeks before we get to those potential conversations that cut to the bone, as you said. Right. Well, and that's what's happened is as the men start talking, they get more comfortable, they get to know each other. We knew that there were certain things that I'm not ready to share that yet. One of the things that I said, I think it was in week 1 or week 2, is that, and please understand this correctly, I said, you've all become priests, which means you're all hearing confessions and everything is confidential. So we don't talk about this outside the group. That was one of the kind of aspects of the 12-step program that we introduced, so that we have more ability to talk about things without a fear that someone's going to use it against us. And we also established the rule that if we want to address some particular issue that someone brings up, then we have to ask their permission. May I ask you about this? Can I ask why you mentioned that or why you struggle with this? And if they say no, we respect their answer. Yeah, ground rules are always important, or expectations, guidelines, what do you call them, for group discussions. Especially if you're going to be dealing with sensitive material like the passions. Right. And people usually share what they're comfortable to share, and we need to be okay with them not wanting to share more. Right. Father Matthew, do you have?
So how are the women reacting? So the women have their group. I'm sure that ministry is still very active, and they're doing what the Antiochian women do. Right. But have you received any response from the women saying, hey, we want a workshop. We want something more structured, or something like this? Have you heard anything from them yet on that?
Nope, and that may happen, it may not happen, I don't know. The most interesting comment I've heard from the women is that when we started this 10-week workshop, half the men that showed up were married. And we asked them, why are you here? My wife said I should be here.
Yeah.
And halfway through, nearly all of them said, my wife said I should still be coming. My wife thinks it's good for me, which is frankly what my wife has said. I said,
Yeah.
you like this? You should keep doing this. This is good for you. It gives you a chance to talk to men outside of the context of ministry. I mean, I'm still in ministry, but it's a different context. And it's good for you. You should do it. And she said, I've noticed a difference that, you're more relaxed when you come home after these meetings, or you've got a little more energy or whatever. So she knows this is good for me.
So there are blessings of obedience. There you go.
Well,
go ahead.
I think it goes back again to the notion that these days in our society, because we're so caught up in digital stuff, and it's too easy to fall into ourselves so much, especially men need to be talking to men. Because it gets us out of ourselves, and it gets us so that we're actually dealing with things that kind of sit in a low burn boil situation inside of us before they come out in some temper or other behavior.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me. There's a priest, Father Anthony Perkins, who has a podcast called and a website, Good Guys Wear Black. And what he repeatedly says is priests need priests. But there's an element of that the umbrella is men need men, and men need to talk to men. And so there's a strong correlation there in what he's talking about with what you're talking about with these men.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think I don't think I have any other questions. I don't know if you know Father Matthew.
No.
Anything you want to share that we haven't covered, or how do you want to close out?
However you guys usually close out.
We usually have a bit more Bible trivia. I should ask one. I have it here. Are you ready? Okay. This is for you, Father Matthew.
Okay. All right.
Name the handmaiden of Sarah.
Sarah as in Genesis, Sarah?
As in Genesis, yes.
I
got it wrong.
All right. So I'm pretty confident, but there are lots of names in Genesis, right?
So many names.
And forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but I pronounce it Hagar.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Hagar.
Yeah. You got it right.
Can I throw one at both of you?
Oh, sure.
Okay. In which book of the Bible does it describe a man being crushed to death by an elephant?
I know that one. I believe it's the Maccabees.
It is. It's in First Maccabees.
First, I was going to say First Maccabees or Second Maccabees. Yeah.
It's my only appearance in the Bible.
It's a story that is a favorite among preteens and young teens. Mm-hmm. This guy sneaks underneath the elephant because of a warfare. He stabs the elephant up in the gut, and the elephant collapses on top of him, and he dies. Mm-hmm. And he's venerated as a martyr.
Yeah.
Don't ever stab me.
I believe he thought that was the elephant that the king was riding on, or the general or something. Right. But he was mistaken.
The Maccabees are not in my list of Bible trivia. Unfortunately, I don't think they are. Right?
You need to expand your list to include the Orthodox books.
I know.
Deacon Adam and I have plans for an Orthodox Bible trivia game, or an Orthodox game in general.
Yeah.
One day. Maybe we'll enlist your help, Father John.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. Okay, well, that's. I think that's it for today, Father John. Thanks for coming in and talking about
Thank you.
men's ministry. Like I opened for those that have come later, that men's ministry is one of those areas where there's been more interest. Knowing that men are they statistically speaking, or through studies, seem to be more of a linchpin, and how connected that family is to church, to God. And so I'm very thankful that you're having these edifying discussions with your men.
Thank you.
I think it's important.
Yep, it is.
Okay.
It is. Yep.
So we'll see all of you next week.
Thank you.
All right, until next time.